ईश्वरम्बा सुता श्रीमन् पूर्वा सन्ध्या.
Hi everyone, welcome to Conversations with Shusara. I'm Meghan Davis, and we're going to discuss a topic that I think is definitely worthy of discussion. I have experienced it myself, and hopefully you can relate as well. So the story that I'm going to bring to you is actually my boyfriend.
Okay.
And we were driving to the airport and we were stuck in traffic, and he kind of course, was opening up to me about his hatred for traffic, and of course I can relate because if I can avoid traffic at all costs, I will. But what he shared with me, I actually wasn't sure how to respond. As a student of the work, I was kind of taken off guard because I thought to myself, well, actually, I have experienced that, and this is something that I have yet to actually come to a full understanding of myself.
Okay.
So I asked him to kind of give me more background for his story,
All right.
so that I could share it. So as I read this, I apologize. So he was telling me that he was always looking for opportunities to advance in his career, and when he finally got that opportunity with a new company, it required driving a company car on a daily basis.
Okay.
So as a result of him having to drive on a daily basis, he used to be stuck in heavy rush hour traffic every day, and he lived in one of the worst cities for traffic because of the growing population, and I guess just the whole layout of it was not accommodating for the amount of people coming in. So he said, the funny thing is, he hates being in traffic, and he at that time felt that there wasn't anything that he hated more than being stuck in traffic.
Okay.
So then he got another huge opportunity to advance in his career, and it requires him flying all over the world. And he said to me, the interesting part about that is that he hates flying more than he hates traffic.
Lovely.
So in him looking closer to see what was running for him with, well, how come I was, I wanted to advance in my career. This is like a dream of mine, and I do it, and I'm now stuck in traffic every day and, hate that aspect of it. And now I have a huge advance in my career, and now I'm forced to fly all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he hates it even more than traffic. So in him looking at that, he realized that he gets really bad anxiety because he fears the plane will go down and he'll of course die on the plane. He said that when he was looking at the different states of mind, the different emotions that runs, he said that when he's in traffic, he gets really angry. He gets mad to the point where it can ruin his day. But he said, I can deal with that. He said with flying, he can get mad for, having to travel to the airport. If he gets stuck in traffic and going to the airport, any delays that he may have with flying out, or waiting for his bags to come, having to go through security, all these things can, make him angry. He said, but what makes flying worse than traffic is the fear of dying in a plane crash. And that whole fear creates anxiety, and he hates that emotion more than being angry. And he said from a little boy, he always feared flying. And then he shared this little twist to me, and he said, you should include this too. And he said, something he's always wanted for himself is someone to share his life with, his desires, his passions, his goals. And he said, and I met you. And he said, you're it. And he said, but that requires me to fly all the time. Something that he hates. So that's that first piece that he looked at. But it continues from there.
Okay. All right.
He went even deeper.
Okay, so go ahead.
So this was when I was like, oh, this is perfect. Even more perfect, I should say. He said to me, he said, that he realized that he feels closest to God when flying. And I said, tell me about that. And he does pray on a normal basis. I mean, it's something, you know, he does even in the moment. He'll just stop and pray. He said, but he feels closest to God when flying because he prays a number of times before flying and then also leading up to the moment he gets on the plane. So, for example, he might pray as he's packing his bags the night before. He can pray on his way to the airport. He can pray when he's at the airport. And he said that before he gets on the plane, I don't know what you call that little tunnel thing, the tarmac or whatever it's called. He said that he puts his hand on the plane. And I think he says something very quickly. And then he gets on the plane. And so he said, he also said that sometimes he will pray during the flight if he does have bad thoughts running through his head. So what he said to me, because I said, so then he said to me, the praying is comforting.
Sure.
It brings in a level of comfort, so it helps with him dealing with the fears and the anxiety. So then I said to him, is it praying that gives you the comfort, or is it the ritual you go through that gives you comfort? And he looked at that and he said, it's most likely the ritual, because if he doesn't do all that, then he has a tough time getting on the plane. He also said that another thing that he does in his prayer is that he kind of prepares himself for what he calls the best and worst case scenario. So I said, well, what does that mean? And he said the best case scenario, he says, first and foremost, I would like to, whoever I'm going to visit, let's say I'm going to visit my girlfriend, I'm going to visit my family, he said, I will pray that I make it there safely and I get to enjoy my time with them, and then I make it safely home. But if you really want the worst case scenario, if I'm really meant to go down in a plane, then please let me make it there so I can spend that time with them, enjoy my time with them, and then on my way back, let it be. If that's the way I'm supposed to go. And so...
What if it's not the way he's supposed to go? What if it's supposed to be the flight out? So do you want me to just speak to the whole thing, or do you want to ask questions about?
Well, that first, I will say for myself, I would like for you to speak to that first part of traffic versus flying and how he found himself in those positions. Because I personally can relate, and that's something I struggle with. And then I do think that it would be also wonderful if you can speak to the whole feeling closest to God when flying, because I think that that's something that I don't even fully understand myself.
Did he say more concerning what is it that happens with him that he then, when he's in the plane en route, is feeling close to God?
He just said that I had this conversation with him this morning so that I would not forget details. It is my understanding that, and I don't know if it's because he feels like his life is in the hands of God in that moment,
As opposed to?
having a lack of control. But he said that he just feels the closest to God. Because at first I was like, it's because you're in the air and you think you're closer to heaven.
Okay.
But he didn't say that. He just said, no, the prayer is comforting.
Okay.
And
Okay. All right. I got it. So what he's experiencing at that stage is a level of surrender that leaves him actually feeling closer to his source, you know. It's a level of surrender that he will not accommodate anywhere else. So, I mean, because the reality is he's always in the hands of God, and he has no control over what is going to happen. But of course the ego wants to convince itself that it has complete control. And that's the whole traffic flying thing, period, for anybody. The reason you get so frustrated when you're in traffic is because you feel powerless. You feel completely victimized by the fact that I have a desire, and my desire is this, and all of this external stuff is keeping me from achieving what I want. And it should not be that way, because whatever I want should be exactly what's going to happen in any given moment. Right? And that's the space of the ego. So anything that comes outside of that, it takes a certain maturity level to go, okay, I guess I'm not going to get there on time. Or with flying, you know, the reason it feels comforting is because the mind is playing that whole ritualistic praying thing and all to allow itself to get into a space where it can convince itself that, okay, I'm at peace with whatever's going to come. But you can see in how he stated it that he's still not at peace, because he's still putting conditions on it. You know, and the condition is, wait until I have the good trip first, right? And then take me out. It's all conditional. So there is, he has a level of surrender there, but it's still not surrender. You know, surrender is knowing in any given moment that could be the last moment. And you're okay with that. You know, no regrets, no nothing. It just is what it is. And that's something that the ego is terrified of. Terrified. We may talk about reincarnation and talk about heaven and ascension, talk about all these things conceptually that the mind will grab onto and go, oh, okay, so I don't need to be afraid of dying because I know that I'll come back again, or I know that I'll go to heaven, or I'll, you know, whatever. For some people, it's just like, I'll end up in the astral plane, and that's pretty cool because it's instant manifestation and stuff like that. So I'm okay with that. But it uses that as the thing that's going to keep itself from not having to deal with what's under it, which is huge amounts of fear and huge amounts of pain. You know, the ego, it knows what's going to happen. It knows that there's an end point to this little game that's going on here. And of course, to the ego, it believes that it's truly an end point. And that's why it's trying to convince itself that it isn't. Of course it isn't. You never actually die. You know, your awareness is continual, beginningless and endless awareness itself. And so at the point of physical death, it's not like you change, because the essence of you is still what it has always been, completely unchanging. But the ego has no way of recognizing the truth in that. The only thing that recognizes the truth in that is that which it already is. You know, it's not something the ego can do, but it can take in the mental knowledge of it and then utilize it as something to believe in. And in the believing in it, it can utilize that to make itself feel better. It is its own swing. It creates its own swing. So for him, he goes through the rituals of praying, and they swing him out. Because what he's doing is, in the way that mind is patterned, when it goes into a spiral, it spirals down, and then it has to create something to swing it out to help it come back up and feel a little better. But in these situations, when there's a lot of fear and everything, it's going like this, you know, because it wants to spiral way down low and just stay there. So it's working overtime to create everything to swing it. So now you end up with someone who feels compulsively like they have to, oh, better pray here, and I better pray again, and I better do it again, because each time it's giving them that little sense of, oh, okay. But then, boom, it just comes right back.
Until you got your destination and then got back home.
Right, yeah. Then, whoo! So, you know, on one level, feeling closer to God in the air is not unusual, just because once you're up over that kind of 6,000 feet marker, you actually have moved up out of the energetic level of the collective. So you actually, in a sense, are closer to what you are. It doesn't have anything to do with, it's funny because the way the grid sits around the planet, it sits out, it's about 6,000 feet. So, so it gives you another understanding of why the great sages and all went into the mountains to do all of their meditation and work, because it's easier to hold your center there. And it was funny, there was some minister, I had a conversation with my husband maybe 6 months ago or something, and some minister, we had it from the Space of His Church, and the members of the church had basically, through their donations, bought a jet for the minister. And it came up somehow, maybe through the IRS, or I don't know what it was, but is that was it legitimate? And so he was from the stance of, that's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And the minister had said that that's where he communicates with God, is when he's flying. And so he needed the jet, a personal space, And so my husband's all very, that's crazy, blah, blah, And I'm like, he has a point. He has a point. And if legally they can get away with, if the congregation is okay with supporting a jet and the fueling of the jet and all of that, and they have the money to do it, why not? But, he probably does actually have a much clearer, you have to remember, not very many preachers, ministers, whatever, are functioning outside of the personal self, So for some of them, they will be as clear as they're going to get when they're out there. Yeah. So there's that component. But for him, it all comes down to this. It's the same for everybody, From the time as a small child, when it starts to lock in, when you start to get the mental understanding of death. Remember, for a small child, they have no comprehension of that. And they have to learn it. They have to learn what it means. And I in my own story with my son, I watched it with him. He was probably 2 at the time, I'm guessing. Yeah. And we were sitting on we had a sunroom at the time, and we were out there together, and there was a little fly who was, it was probably a younger one, because it wasn't terribly scared of the people, but he saw it, and of course he's fascinated. There's this little thing, and I think it was on the chair, and he walks over, and I just watched him, and he's so curious, and he started kind of poking at it, this little bug, and he kills it. Not because he wanted to, but he didn't know what he was doing. After he did that a few times, it just stopped moving. And then he's confused. And he said something about the fly waking up, and I said, I'm sorry, honey, the fly can't wake up. And now he's confused again. What do you mean? And I said, well, the part of the fly that was the fly isn't here anymore. It's gone. And now that the part that's left can't do anything anymore. And that was his first recognition that there's something called non-existence, on a level he couldn't really comprehend, but he got some of it. And it clicked in just enough that the recognition was there, and he started crying because he made the connection that it's because of me that this thing can't move around anymore. I killed it, and it locks in. Now, once it's locked in, now through the world, you're going to get different experiences of this death thing. And so when you look at it from that space, what everybody ends up in is that moment of, that's going to happen to me. If it happened there, there's, everything is taken in. So they make a connection. That's a living, moving, breathing thing. I'm a living, moving, breathing thing. And of course, little kids, at some point they experience their grandparents passing and or other people they know, or hearing about someone on TV, whatever it is. And it's like, I have this limited window now.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the ego, it's terrifying. Oh my gosh. I have to, it already thinks it has to control everything as it is. So now it's like, ooh, like, we got to get serious about this. It's completely up to me to make this as good as possible for as long as possible, and, keep trying to convince myself that I'm not going to die, or I don't have to think about it, or whatever it is. So it just wants and needs to hold this space of, I'm in control. It's all my choice. It's, I have the power, and it's up to me to not give my power away. I love hearing that, giving your power away. Like what? What is that? But that's what the ego says. I'm giving my power away, and if I can finagle everything right, it's all going to work in my favor. Because it knows ultimately that none of it works in the ego's favor, right? And I think that's for a lot of people too, even. And this was personal for me. When I first heard about ascension and first started that kind of journey of doing the work that leads to ascension, there was part of it came from the space of, I don't want to die. Because the understanding, because you don't know what ascension is, but the understanding is it means that you don't have to do the life-death cycle anymore. So maybe you can get away without actually physically dying, Ooh, I think I want that. And that was my experience until I recognized, well, of course the body's going to die. Oh, duh. It has to here. And then, oh, okay. But until you come up against, and then in that journey, you will come up against instances where you will be, where you think you're going to physically die. And you have to, because until you're at the point where you move into that space without fear, in the place of surrender to what is, it's still the ego just completely in control of all of it. Trying to control all of it anyway. And there are lessons in that. So this is how it comes forward. It comes forward for everybody this way. Traffic. I can't stand traffic, because who are you to stop me from getting where I'm trying to go? And it sits there as anger because the pain is underneath it of, you, God, did stop me from trying to go where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And every time I try to go, you stop me again. And of course that's where self-righteousness is born, in the space of pain, feeling like there's something outside of it that has denied it, rejected it, continues to not accommodate it. And the ego tries everything, it tries every path it can think of to get back in the good graces of its creator. And it doesn't work. It may seem to work for a little while, but then it always will experience something that seems to reinforce its belief that you really aren't what I want you to be, The ego hates God. It really does.
Yeah.
From a place of very deep pain. Remember, anger is only there to cover pain. That's what happens. Because the anger comes out of self-righteousness, right? And the pain is there in victimization. And the only way to get out of pain is to create self-righteousness, which now says it's your fault. The victim says it's my fault, right? I've done something wrong. And self-righteousness is born and says, no, I don't think it was me. I think it was you. You're not all that. I don't care what anybody says. You're not. And it works overtime all your life to try and navigate this space between, here's our concept of God being a loving entity, and that conceptually it can say, well, I could look at the teachings of the Christ, and conceptually it can say, my sins have already been forgiven, and there's nothing I could do that would keep me from the kingdom of heaven, or however you wanted to word it. but they're it's kind of like just paying lip service to something without believing it underneath, because people don't believe it underneath.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. And the reality is, there is never, on the level of the ego, there's never a space where you believe it. Because when it's your reality, belief doesn't have any role in it. You see, because the one who knows it is in essence already it. Yeah. But to continue to walk through and saying, I believe this, no, you don't. You want to believe it. You're working really hard to believe it. But there's always doubt that sits under it. Yeah. And it keeps people in the space of suffering. So every time you get in your car, you suffer. Every time you climb on a plane, you suffer.
But do you, because like I said, I've experienced this myself and I don't have a clear understanding of it. Because I have felt that I will want something for myself really bad, and I think it's good for me. And when I obtain it, I'm like, but this isn't what I wanted. This is painful.
Right.
And then you want something even more. And then you get that, and it's like, ugh, this sucks even more. And so is it something that you bring to yourself on purpose?
Sure.
To keep the story running?
Well,
or
it's
is it
twofold.
something it actually serves in your best interest because it will help you to bring you to a point where you need to look at your perspective, how you're functioning in the world. I don't know if I'm making sense.
You're making perfect sense, and the answer is yes and yes. It's both, right? And that's the paradox of it. On one side, do you bring it to yourself because it keeps you perpetuated in the same pattern? Yeah, exactly. Because the pattern, remember, the ego being not even conscious, it being a program, that pattern is going to continue to set things up so that it will perpetuate itself. That's what it's programmed to do. It's outside of your conscious awareness, but you're doing it. But simultaneously, and it's, I have to remind people, the keys to the kingdom are in the program. Every step of the way, they're always right there. It's just a matter of, can you start to recognize, and that's what you're just speaking to now, does it come up because it gives me an opportunity to go, why is it that I thought this was going to be good for me and I thought this was going to do this thing, and now when it happens, I realize it's not. Well, exactly for the reason that it's meant for you to look at it and go, why am I placing hinging my hopes on something out here, when if I was clear here, it wouldn't matter what happens here.
Right.
It wouldn't matter.
Right.
And the only reason it matters so much to me that I say that would be good for me and I really want it, and when I get it, it doesn't fill the need, is because you're not clear here. When one is clear here, there's no need, period. There's no need.
Yeah.
There can be desire, sure, there can be desire, but there's no attachment to the desire. So, in a moment to walk past a store window and go, wow, those are great looking shoes. I think I'd like to wear those. Sure. But you're not going to lose sleep over the fact that you can't afford them, or you'll buy them and you'll love wearing them, and then one day you get the heel stuck in the escalator or something and it breaks, and it doesn't ruin your day because you just broke your favorite pair of shoes. You recognize, as the Buddha would say, the cup is already broken. It was already ruined before you ever put them on your feet. So, so you treasure the time that you have without projecting forward to the day when it's going to break or they're going to wear out, and without thinking back to how miserable you were before you got them. and then projecting, I'm going to be just as miserable when they break. You know, you're suffering in the middle of all of it. And the point is now, present with it now, love it now, knowing that that's all you've got is right now. And it's a perfect way to view stepping on an airplane. All I've got is right now anyway. Why am I worried about where I'm going to land? Why am I worried about when we take off? I'm here now. And in this moment, everything's fine. You know, everything's just fine. And in the moment when everything isn't fine, you have to recognize that that's the way within the structure of what is meant to be, everything is fine. Not easy when you're sitting in heavy turbulence on an airplane. Or not easy in the moment where the heel breaks off of the shoe to say, oh, I guess it was supposed to break, or I guess the plane's supposed to do what it's doing, you know. But it reminds me of some comedian at some point was talking about this whole thing, you know, about it being your time to die, and made the point of, you know, well, what if it's not my time to die? What if it's the pilot's time to die? You know, and it's such a statement of ego that says it's not whatever's happening in the moment unless I'm in agreement with it. It's not right timing. It's not meant to be. And honestly, it's just an illusion of the mind that would say that there's anything that could happen that's outside of right timing. Because the ego says right timing is dictated by what I think should be, you know, and the reality is there's no ego. There's something else dictating all of it. And that can only happen within the space of what is perfect. Because that's all it is perfect anyway.
And that's difficult because, it's hard to ingest the fact that you have no control and that there's something else behind it. Because the ego holds so strongly. No, I have control over all of this. For my personal story, I am a college professor, and I'm the one who put myself through my bachelor's and my master's, and I worked extremely hard to get to where I am now, and I did cancer research, and I did all these things.
Right.
I have my own house. I did all this. I did that. I walked that path. Nobody else did but me. And so it's hard to really open yourself up to the idea that, no, you didn't.
Right. Right. Very
Even
hard.
though you feel like you walked that path with your own 2 feet. No.
That's right.
And that's so hard to swallow and to accept. And with that acceptance, it is, okay, I'm going to, it changes your whole perspective. You actually don't seek trying to control things. And what I've noticed for myself is that when I let things be, when I catch myself and I see, okay, well, I'm trying to control that, or I think that I'm controlling it, or trying to figure out a way how I can control it, I just kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, let things flow the way that they're going to. And in that moment, that is a form of surrendering and being an allowance. And the ego will try to kick and scream. But, I just don't give it any acknowledgement, really.
Mm.
But, it's still difficult to,
But let me stop you there, and I'm going to have to correct you.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you're going to like this. So to say, when I step back and allow it to flow the way it's meant to, honey, it can't not flow the way it's meant to. Whether it's the ego-driven flow or the divinely driven flow, it's all the same thing. Anyway, there is nothing outside of it. There's nothing outside of it. And that's a component, even in stating that, even though it feels like that's what's happening, that still only shows that you believe the story, that the ego has power.
So let's stick with the traffic thing, because like I said, I struggle with this too. I could be happily on my way and all of a sudden I'm in traffic and then like, I gotta be somewhere at that time.
Yes.
And then I sit back and I go, okay, well obviously it's meant for me to be in traffic and I'll just, sit here, not attached to it, and I'll just keep going, and when I get there, I get there. And to me, that's me being an allowance. However, I can still see, now that you say that I still view the world as me still going like this, with my foot on the gas pedal,
Right.
versus stop, gas, stop. And I'm still in it.
Right. Right.
Psychologically, I've convinced myself, and maybe there is a level of higher understanding coming in and coming through, but I can see how there's still some level of attachment to the story, and in believing that I'm still that one saying, okay, well, I'll just allow things the way
That's
they'll be.
right. That's right. That's still identification. It still is.
Darn it!
And the reality.
Peel back the layers. Keep peeling them back.
That's right. And your point is well taken. The initial. The initial.
A little bit of a disappointment for myself in my journey.
That's true. That initial coming up against. Oh. It doesn't seem to matter what it is. It's still not what I want it to be or what I think it is, and I'm completely outside of having control over any of it. That is real tough for the ego. Real tough. I mean, when someone is first given that little nugget, wherever it comes from, the ego just goes, oh, like, what? Mm-hmm. It doesn't even know what to do with that, and it can't get its bearings around it because its whole world just went completely. And it takes time to keep introducing that to get it to start settling into being willing to look at it.
Mm.
And then you end up with this kind of what you're experiencing there, this kind of almost split personality thing of when I'm the ego and when I'm not the ego. Excuse me. It's all the same thing. And you know that well. And that's something that most seekers move into. They start almost speaking in third person about themselves, which you would do when Meghan wants this, but here's what I'm seeing. You go, show me how they're different. I don't, right? Easy to do though, because you have higher understanding and you can see the pattern running, and there's another level of awareness that is seeing it on multiple levels, but it's still identified. From a scientific place, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that even when you deal with electrical impulses, something is happening on a level prior to an impulse being sent to the brain, which then makes the body make a movement, right? Mm-hmm. And that's outside of whatever seems to be awareness here. Mm. And they don't know where it comes from, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So if you can look at it from that space, if consciousness itself is the thing that creates the impulse for everything, that's not you.
Yeah.
Now we can say on a greater, grander level it is you, of course, but I have to be careful with that, because what mind does is, well, it's me. And then it plays the game of, oh, that's just me when I'm not this me. But it's still me. Well, you're still identified. There is an I am, and it is individuated but it's not the me you think of yourself as being, not even close. And it's only you can't even say an experience of it because there's no one experiencing it, you see. To say there's someone who experiences it automatically creates the space of separation. Because it means that if something is to be experienced, think about this, to be experienced, it means it has to exist outside of you for you to then have the experience of it, right? And that's why at the level of the I am, or the level of consciousness, there's no one experiencing anything. Pure awareness just is. There's no observer, no one watching, no one witnessing. And in deeper dissolution work, what you're working to do, seemingly, is to, it's like here's the personal self that's running all the stories and all the beliefs and judgments and everything else. And then here's the objective observer, which is capable of just watching with no judgment. And you're working to kind of, like in the beginning of your work, the observer doesn't even exist for most people, or it's very, very tiny. And, personal self is all consuming. And then you're working over time to kind of, personal self starts shrinking down, the observer's getting stronger, stronger, stronger. But even the level of the observer is part of the lower mind, part of this construct, right? And that gets kicked out at the end as well. Because there is no one observing anything, really.
I do have a question that's kind of, well, I guess it's on topic but off topic. We always talk about the doer.
Yeah.
And the doer being reactive mind, and also the questioner.
Yes.
So, as a student of dissolution work, it's been my experience. I have shifted from the doer, and my language might be wrong because I might not understand it clearly, to the observer, who's not the doer. But in saying that even the observer gets dissolved out. Hopefully people follow me with this. Is the questioner still part of the observer?
No, the observer just observes. It just observes.
No.
The questioner is part of the ego.
Okay. Okay.
No, the observer just observes. That's all it does. It's just like the watcher. No story, just watching.
And then...
Like you watching a movie without having any emotional attachment to it, or mental attachment to it, just watching.
And so the observer is still part of the construct where you still see yourself separate.
Yeah, because something witnesses
because
the
you
observer.
feel like you're, because you're still
right.
seeing something.
Yes.
Outside of you that you're observing.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So I can see then how that's the last result.
Right.
Okay. I see how there are many levels of separation.
Oh, yeah.
And I never really saw it that way before. I always thought, okay, well, I just think I'm separate from God and separate from everything, including this couch that I'm sitting on. But I just saw it as, this very defined concept. But really and truly, it goes beyond that.
Yeah. Layers and layers and layers and layers. And it's so challenging too, because just as you do your work, your own language is going to trip you up constantly, right?
Yeah.
To say that I see that I thought I was separate from everything, and not only me being separate from the couch, and the language itself is polarized.
Mm.
Every time you say I, there it is. Polarization every time, right? That's why I used to get a kick out of, I don't know if she still does it, but with Byron Katie, she never said I. You know, maybe she does now, I don't know. But for a while, back when she was in my awareness more, she would refer to herself like in third person, or just the hand, or yeah, the woman, the whatever, because she's not that.
Yeah.
Whatever I is, it's not that. Nor the thoughts there,
Mm-hmm.
nor the emotion, nor the body, nor the... So, and you can see why just language alone keeps you completely stuck in it. People wonder why, generally speaking, those who have, attained a level of illumination don't talk a whole lot. Really, not much to talk about.
Mm.
You know, you talk when it's necessary, certainly to speak like this in a teaching capacity or whatever. It has its purpose, but to sit around and chit chat with people, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why do we do it? You know, how many people really think about that? Why do I talk so much? Why do I feel like I have to talk so much? Why am I uncomfortable when I'm with someone and no one's speaking, and I feel like I have to turn the radio on or put the TV on? I'm not comfortable with it, you know. Why? When you know yourself to be all of it, what needs to be said?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That's the beautiful thing when you find people that you really do resonate from that place where you don't have to talk.
Yeah.
You can just be together. And it's so much more powerful to just be together versus sharing stories.
Yeah.
Okay. But the personality, and for some people more than others, but the sense of self for some is very, very strongly attached to their stories. That's where they get their positive sense of self. And those are the people who like to tell stories all the time, and they'll tell you the same story over and over, even when they know you've heard it. or you tell them, yeah, I remember when you told me that, and then they continue telling it again anyway. They need to. It makes them feel good about themselves to tell the story.
Now, is that if it's a positive story or a negative
Doesn't
story?
matter. That's where they get their sense of self, is through their stories.
Is it because it defines them?
Yeah.
It defines their outer world?
Yeah. It gives them a point of reference for themselves, because of where they stand in relation to all the stories. Mm-hmm.
I understand that now. It's very interesting.
Yes, it is. Yeah. If you aren't identified with any story or anything that, quote unquote, happens to you, where would the need come from to share it with others? Right?
Oh. Yeah.
And look at how much suffering in the world comes from people who, a lot of women like to talk, right? Not across the board, but a lot of women do. And so how much suffering happens within the collective of women whose partners won't listen to them. He never likes to talk to me. He doesn't want to hear, And they feel like they've been diminished because their significant other doesn't really care to hear their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't mean anything to them, right? But the one who wants to tell the story is highly attached to the story. It identifies me. It's telling you who I am, right? And it isn't. It does nothing other than reinforce a false belief.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
People hang on to their old stories when they get, they're middle-aged and they just walk around talking about what happened to them in high school.
Good old days.
Or how great I was, and I was such a great musician, and I was this and that. Why are they doing it? Because they have to hold on to that piece, that aspect of their sense of self that actually felt positive. Why? Because what they're experiencing is they're going in the other direction. Yeah, not getting better. I'm decreasing. And so let's hold on to those stories. They're important. Because if I don't, I'm going to get depressed. I'm going to, not that it's conscious, but that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had that go on because, with my kids when it came to, say, music, them asking me questions and, so-and-so said you were a really good musician or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any need to go, oh, let me tell you all these stories of all these, awards I got, or this thing that happened, or this thing? There's nothing there that feels like it has to boost its sense of self in front of children or whomever, And that's the funny thing. Outside of, the ego is anything but humble.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of the ego, that's really all that's there is, there's no I. What's there to... It's not self-deprecating. You understand? It's not like when the ego isn't there, now I've turned into this mushy thing that's easily manipulated because you still have boundaries, you still have all of it, but you're not attached to any of it either.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an interesting marker, I think, when you look at people. You can have people who might even come to something like satsang or whatever, and it's really easy usually to gauge where someone's at as far as their level of being ready to truly do dissolution work. Because if they come in from a space where they want to talk to you about how much they know already, or they sit in a space where they want to start dialoguing back and forth with you to basically challenge what you're bringing, they're not ready. Their sense of self is too ingrained in having to be right. Too ingrained in having to know, and it's not humble enough yet to go, what I do know is that I don't know, and that's that key moment for someone. What I know, the only thing I know through and through is that I really don't know anything. And oh my gosh, I see that. I actually see that now. That's not to say, you're an accountant and you're saying I don't know numbers. I don't mean it that way. But as far as the greater questions about life, who I am, and where it's all headed, and what happens next, and what's my purpose here, or where does it fit? All of those questions, we're all chasing after the answers, right? And that's what ego does. Just chases everywhere looking for them, and it feels like it doesn't want to stop until it finds it, but it doesn't really want to plant itself long enough anywhere to see if it maybe will take it someplace, a deeper understanding. So within that space, you're not ready. You're not ready for the surrender that's necessary to go, show me where I'm wrong. That's hard. You've spent a lifetime, and not to mention many lifetimes, working really hard to prove to yourself how right you are. And now you're going to come to someone and say, show me every place I'm wrong. And that's what you're doing without realizing you're doing it, but that's what you're doing. show me every place where I'm wrong. And it takes a great amount of humility to do that.
Sure does.
Yeah.
It sure does.
And that humility is a really beautiful thing to witness in someone.
Well, after the fact.
Well,
For the person going through it.
Yeah. But remember, humility, like I said, it's not self-deprecating. Self-deprecation is all ego, because it wants to continue to feel like a victim. True humility says, I know I don't know, and I will recognize, I am open to you showing me what I don't know. I will recognize it, and I will own it for the fact that I didn't know it. But I'm not going to beat myself up over the fact that I didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to think of myself as less than because I did it wrong. I'll take the experience and I will utilize it for what can be gained from it, and I move on. That's humility. That's very healthy humility. Very beautiful. The ego wants to say, oh gosh, first it's afraid to be proven wrong, and then sometimes the ego wants to be proven wrong so I'm always wrong, I can't do anything right.
Yeah.
And it's hard for students when they, it's hard just to step forward and say, show me. Obviously where I sat, I guess, and where a lot of people sit really is the moment of recognition of, obviously, if I knew,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be sitting where I'm sitting now,
Mhm.
because I would have changed it. So on some level, obviously, I don't know, right? You can speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried all the stuff. I did what I thought was the right stuff to do. I'm still in pain. Still not happy with my life, with my world, with who I think I am, and I don't like myself. Okay, now that's that moment, I guess I have to be prepared to see something different.
Yeah.
And knowing it's not going to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel good. But that's the marker, the person who's willing to not feel good and take it without, even though part of you will want to be in resistance to it and argue back, and and that's always the perfect way to know where you're truly identified, when you start arguing back.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't understand me. You don't see it clearly. No, but right. And you know me, I love to jump on anyone as soon as I get the first but. It's like, you don't, do you? Are you sure? Of course you do. Yeah, that's not fun to hear.
No.
Yeah, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Because you think you're so right.
Yeah. And then to
And
see
justified.
it, and justified in it. That's right. And of course, that's all self-righteousness. Yeah. Right. So even the whole, oh no, but I'm a humble seeker. And as soon as the first but comes out and you're fighting for whatever it is that you want to fight for, now there has to come a recognition that is self-righteousness. There's no humility there. That's like,
Yeah.
beautiful. It's scary to think of it as it's this constant tearing down, and it's scary to the ego and feels painful on the level of the ego. But something in there, you just have to hold on to your knowing that the whole point of the tearing down is just it's not that anything has to be built up after it. It doesn't. The whole point is to tear it down so you can see what's sitting there, waiting. Mm-hmm. It's there. Nothing else has to happen. That's so hard. The ego thinks it has to learn everything and be shown everything. There's nothing to learn. Now it looks like that for a while, but what you are hasn't gone anywhere, and the divinity that you are, the essence that you are, can't be destroyed, it can't be changed, it can't be anything other than you have a loss of recognition of it, right? And that's this whole thing. Tear it all down, because what remains is real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So don't be afraid of questioning and going in to look deeper at your own behaviors, to start tearing them down. You know, you aren't less than because you're tearing it down. You're more than, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact opposite. You know,
It takes a lot of strength
it sure does.
and courage.
It sure does. A huge amount of courage. That's something, you know, now you can speak to it differently now than you would have a year ago. And every time you come into an experience where you're like, wow, I thought it took a lot of courage to do this work. I had no idea until I had to walk through that last one. And, you know, and then the next time you're going to have the same experience. It just goes on, you know, to a certain point.
Mm.
Like, and it's like that with all of it. You know, it takes a huge amount of strength as well. Not only the courage to face it, but the strength to see it through.
Mm-hmm.
And then greater than that, the determination to walk it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
The strength to see it through, because whoo, when you're in it, you don't want to, and it does. It sometimes you have to, like, you pull everything from within you to. Okay, I'm gonna see it through, and then now it's, oh God, now I've seen it. Now I have to live it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that takes determination,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so easy to not live it.
Mm-hmm.
So easy. Yeah. The downside is, I have to speak this way because it's true to the experience, you know, and for most people, still, it's too scary. You know, oh my God, I hear you say that, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Teach me some mudras and I'll sit in meditation. Like, I'm good with that, but this whole tearing it down thing and
Yeah.
courage, strength, determination, I don't think so. But, you know, you do yourself a disservice to not. What did you say I think it was the last time we talked. What do I have to lose? My pain?
Oh,
You said?
yeah. My unhappiness?
My unhappiness? You know.
Unhappiness.
So where's the problem?
I have to say that's part of what got me through initially. Because when I really became committed to this, and I really, you know, jumped in, and, you know, I was, you know, doing processing work, doing the inner work, and really looking at my actions and you know, if I think, oh, I'm not selfish, and then I come to find out, no, I really am selfish. You know, those are really difficult things to see
Yeah.
and to own. And initially when I was doing this work, I was like, this is too hard. Like, this makes me feel a lot worse than before. But what I realized is that there was some liberation in walking this walk.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I had to ask myself, would you really want to go back to
Right.
what the life you think you had before?
Right.
I mean, you were unhappy then. You were miserable.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
What are you going to give up? Your
Right.
unhappiness?
Yep.
And I was like, well, screw it. I'm heading straight for the path of enlightenment.
I was going to say as you're speaking that, you know, in the beginning of working with any student, one of the things, the understandings that you have to give them is they aren't the ego. You aren't this personality that you're identified with. You are not. And so because you have some understandings that are coming in that you can't comprehend, you know, beyond a superficial mental level. But they're there, and they continue to be presented to you, and that's why you have to do both simultaneously, because if you didn't, the student would walk away.
Mm-hmm.
This is too hard. But once you have been given this piece that says, this is really hard, but on some level, this isn't me. And that's what I'm here to discover, feels like. That's what I'm here to do, to actually move to the space where I know it's not me. And now when I'm in the space where I know it's not me, how will I ever suffer again? Right? And so even from just a purely conceptual place, you can understand, oh, so if I can do this work and then make it to that point, at that point everything changes. Yeah. And that's true. At that point, everything changes. Whether it means you're liberated or not doesn't matter. Everything changes there. Because you can still engage in the story. You can still find yourself identified with the story. But now you've come out enough that you always come back to that spot. Oh. There it was again.
Yeah.
You know, thought I was miserable again. But now I'm back on the other side of it. Now I see it for what it is. And I just walked through it and I picked up a whole bunch of wisdom I didn't have four days ago. You know, and now you're not afraid to really walk into anything. Go ahead, say that. Yeah. Yeah, you'll still have your moments. But even then it's seen through. Even then in the space of the fear, there's still something going, oh, you're going to do it. Like we were just talking about that before. I'll do it anyway. Of course I will. I might stand here and scream about it. I might pound on the door. I want to do it, you know. But I know I'm going to anyway. You know, there's just this surrender to the whole process. In that space, you know, you just aren't the same ever again.
No, you're not.
You know. So if you were to look back at Meghan from 4 years ago, you know, who is she? She does not exist for you anymore.
No, and sometimes I even try to pull up a memory and I go, yeah, that's not really, it doesn't even feel real.
It doesn't feel real anymore.
If you asked
right.
me a couple years ago, you know, to recall a memory that was, let's say, even painful, and, you know, I could kind of feel it again, you know, I can kind of relive it. And now it's just, that happened? Like if someone had said to me, do you remember that happened? I'd be like, huh, yeah, that did happen, I guess. You know, there's really no attachment to it. It's not something that even defines me or creates a history for me. Or
Right. Because it's the only thing that keeps memory seeming real is the identification with it.
Yeah.
Right. And so for you, while you're identified, all your memories are real and they really happened. But outside of identification, you know, you pull up the picture of the moment when whatever happened, and it's now you are just on the other side of the TV screen, just watching it with no story, just watching it, probably laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first time I experienced it, I was like, wow, this is really cool. Because, you know, previously, and you know, I'm sure people can relate to this, you know, previously if I drew up a memory, you'd suffer all over again.
Right.
And now that I don't experience that. And when I first witnessed that, I was like, wow, that's very cool.
Yeah. Stages of liberation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is seriously liberating. Because whenever, in truly what happens when mind pulls up a memory, you are reliving it. So there is no past, you understand. In the moment of bringing it forward, it just became present. So if it, conceptually, it seems like it was past, but you're actually in it now. And the mind says, well, but no, it happened back there because it's so identified with the physical world, and it can go, but I'm sitting here now, I'm not back in my kitchen, right? So it's not happening now. Of course it's happening now, because wherever your mind is, that's where you are. And that's true. True, through and through, wherever your mind is, I don't care where the physical body's planted, wherever your mind is, that's where you are. So the cool thing now is that you're capable of pulling up these pictures and just looking at them, and they do. It's you have to tell yourself when they happen,
Yeah,
because they
it's-
don't. They're just hanging there, space timeless, just hanging there. It's just a picture, and there's no identification with the when, with the where, with any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I've said to all my students at some point, you know, when I look at pictures of myself throughout my lifetime, it's kind of like it becomes very difficult to get in her, you know, and see the world through her lens. I can't do it anymore. I just look at it, I'm like, oh, she was pretty. Or whatever it is, you know. Great picture. That looked like fun. But she doesn't exist. She just doesn't exist. She never did, you know. And that's the piece that you wake up to. Oh, this whole thing, you know, it never existed.
I'm glad you said that, because that makes sense to me now. Why, if I do, you know, have to go back to a memory, and it's not emotionally charged, there's, you know, I have no attachment to it, or that it's almost like looking at somebody else's picture.
Yes.
As if picking up somebody, you know, you're in someone else's house or whatever, and you're looking at a picture and you just look at it objectively.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then.
That's exactly it. More challenging, you know, becomes easy to do that looking back at 6 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. More challenging to look at it as yesterday. Because if I asked you to look back at a memory of an argument with your boyfriend 4 days ago, I'm guessing it's not going to feel quite the
There's
same.
still that right here. Yeah, still a little bitter. Still a little identified.
Yes, right. You know, and the world is the exact opposite of what is, you know, that what you are as essence, you know, as God itself, is expansion, pure expansion, you know, and the world is complete contraction. Everything here is contraction. So when you say when we talked before this week at South Sign, you know, you say it's not real, and yet it feels real, you know, and how do you deal with that? Is it real? Is it illusion? Is it, you know, because it certainly feels real, and it does, but when you have the experience of the expansion that you are, truly, and then you come back into the contraction of the world, the contraction of the body, then you see it. This can't be real. As convincing as it may seem, it just can't be. Because God is not contraction. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. We'll do it again.
Thanks for joining us. Hope you liked it. Give us a thumbs up if you did, and we'll see you next time. Bye.